Good afternoon and welcome to You and Your Business with me, Alec Drew, on 103.2 Dublin City FM. Each week I invite a guest from the world of business to share their knowledge, insights and tips to help you increase profits, reduce costs and drive efficiencies. If there's a topic you'd like discussed, or perhaps if you'd like to make a contribution yourself, please email me at yourbusiness@dublincityfm.ie and perhaps we might be chatting here one day soon. My guest today is an international speaker who loves helping companies get from A to B. In fact, he has taken himself from A to B in both his personal and business life. He is the founder of the Gerry Duffy Academy, none other than Gerry Duffy. Delighted, Gerry, to have you on the show. How are things?
I'm really good, Alec. I'm delighted and honored to be a part of your show and looking forward to chatting with the listeners.
We've got rid of the mutual backslapping now, so we can talk. I take all of our guests back to their school days. Some people are heavily academically inclined. Others just want to see the world. Where did you fit between those two extremes?
Well, if I tell you that I think the year I did my Leaving Cert, I think it was the Queen concert in Slane. I think that was the year.
Oh, really?
Or it was either that or Bruce Springsteen, one or the other. But I'm not sure. Did Springsteen ever play in Slane? I'm not sure. But 85 was the year anyway. And
all right.
Alec, I hadn't got a clue. I really hadn't. 17 years of age, on reflection, even 10 years later, I realized I hadn't got a clue 10 years before that. Incredibly raw, scraped through the Leaving Cert. No, I mean, scraped through the Leaving Cert. Just didn't do an awful lot, if I'm being honest, at the time. I kind of, I didn't put an awful lot of effort into it. I didn't have, it's something I speak about now a lot, is having respect for your goals. And sometimes it's not that we don't have the ability to achieve what we want, it's maybe we just need to bring absolute respect. And I didn't respect school, didn't respect what I needed to do, didn't have any kind of a vision of what I wanted to do. My dad was in insurance, my dad was in business. I kind of grew up with that influence, my dad wearing a suit and a tie. He was a fantastic salesperson, just really got on well with people, really cared about his clients. And he was in the insurance industry. So it kind of was almost not an expectation from his viewpoint, but it seemed like an easy route for me to go. I'll just get a job in insurance. And I was promised a job in the UK. So I went to the UK in 1986 on the promise of a job. They said, listen, if you come over to the UK and you like it, then we'll give you a job. Right. 9 months later, no sign of the job. Maybe they were just a nice way of saying, we don't want to give you a job, but I came back and ended up, long story short, I ended up going into the travel stroke insurance industry for 14 years. And what I mean by that is I worked for an insurance company, but they only specialized in travel insurance. Wow. So our entire market was the travel industry. So we kind of saw ourselves as being in the travel industry rather than the insurance industry.
Yes, and actually that's a nice tie-in, because once you mention insurance, people's eyes glaze over. But if you mention travel, you've got them hooked straight away.
Indeed, yeah. And so they specialize, as I say, in travel insurance. I started at the bottom there and slowly over time kind of worked my way up to maybe a higher level and ended up years later becoming the sales manager for the company. But in the intervening period, my uncle had actually come to work in the company and we got on great. But after a number of years, I don't know whether he was trying to get rid of me, but he was certainly encouraging me maybe to look beyond that role. He felt that there was more out there for me, and I was beginning to feel that way myself. So around the turn of the millennium, I started to get itchy feet and started to maybe cast a new vision, and that new vision meant I ended up opening my own business soon after that. And I went into the property business, sales, letting, management, which at the time was a good idea, not such a good idea when the recession hit. So then I kind of maneuvered myself and kind of looked at skills and value to the marketplace and ended up, ironically, where you and I first connected many years ago, where we're both, in that speaking world
of professional speaking. I suppose just let me take you back a bit, because we've covered quite a number of years there very quickly. If I just take you back to what you learned from the travel insurance side of it, what were the sort of dynamics? What were the key lessons in life that you started picking up from somebody who's sort of naive leaving school and really wasn't invested in anything?
Well, ironically, it's a great question you ask, and my immediate answer, because one of the things I speak about a lot, and a lot happened in the 20 years for sure, and one of the things I speak about now a lot is leadership. And why am I talking about leadership now? Because I like to think I'm a quiet person, even though I'm on stage and maybe sometimes really big stages speaking about the expertise that I might have for companies. But off stage, I'm a very quiet person. And when I was in sales, because I was out selling a lot of the time to the travel industry, One thing I was really good at, and I think it's the number one key to be a great leader, is what's the quality of your relationships like? Because I really believe the success of our businesses are determined by the success of our relationships with key stakeholders. So usually that would be customers and team members. And so for me, the company had great success. It was a very, very good company at what it did. They were brilliant at building relationships with their clients. They really, really cared about their clients. So what the big learning there is, I transferred that now into leadership, and some of the core modules we teach in leadership is all centered or grounded in building great relationships with your customers and with your teams.
One of the things I know from you, Gerry, and as you said, we go back a number of years, is anytime somebody asks you a question, you can be quite pensive, and you're not shooting from the hip. You like to consider your response to that. How important is that, do you feel, in life, that people's, are too quick to respond?
Yeah, well, I think, again, and I love to teach public speaking now, rather ironic given the fact that it was once a pathological fear. But I think one of the most important things with speaking, and one of the most important things when you're speaking with anybody, is to actually be present. Be present. And one aspect of present is to be really tuned in to, if somebody's going to ask you your opinion, ask your advice, maybe to, rather than just give an immediate answer just to be seen to be the hero of the hour or whatever, just say, well, if I was to give them advice, what's the best advice I could give them, rather than just giving them advice or giving them an opinion? What's the best opinion I could give them? Because if your second best, if your best opinion doesn't work, your second best opinion probably definitely won't or mightn't work. But what's the best thing you can do? And that means just pausing for 5 seconds or 10 seconds, or even maybe having the courage or the confidence to say, I actually don't know at this time, but listen, let me think about it, and I'll send you an email this evening, or let's pick this up tomorrow, let's meet next week. I think, and you and I have been on lots of stages where there's Q&A, and sometimes the speakers I admire the most are the ones that say, I don't know the answer to the question you've just asked me, but let's follow up afterwards. I think that takes either courage or confidence, or also, as you mentioned, a genuine care in the person to give them not just an answer, but the best answer you could give them. That's an example of being truly present with people.
Yeah, I think actually being truly present, I might call it something slightly different, but you might explain it to me. Actually really listening, what I say is, because so many people, you can see them, they want to speak while somebody else is, which means obviously they're not listening.
Yeah, and the man I've learned an awful lot from over the years, Alec. You might be familiar with a man called Jim Rohn, R-O-H-N. Some of your listeners might be familiar. And there's so many of Jim Rohn's quotes and teachings etched in my brain, because I just was so taken with what I learned from this man. And he said, one of the greatest gifts you can give someone is the gift of your attention. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that, to be truly present with the person.
No, I think that's very, very valuable. But anyway, taking it back, as I said, you were in the travel industry, but you found yourself being slightly niched in that, in terms of you met a great person in that industry.
I did, yeah. So I had a full-time job, which kept me really, really busy. But I had a part-time job, and I had a very good boss as well, as you know, because my boss was my uncle. But I was very lucky, because I was in the travel industry, albeit selling insurance. One of our clients was a wonderful gentleman called, and some listeners might remember, a great man on an Irish soccer stage, Ray Tracy. Yes, and Ray was somebody that I got to know through being in that industry. And Ray was kind enough. I remember in the first time I ever did some part-time work with Ray was the Ryder Cup in 1997. Wow. And some people, golfing fans, might remember that Ryder Cup was held in Spain, in Valderrama, and Seve Ballesteros, a big hero of mine, was the captain. And anyway, Ray chartered a couple of airplanes and flew a lot of people out there, and he asked me, along with quite a few other people, to come and support him in that, in terms of being the team on the ground. And that opened up a whole new door of travel opportunity for me, because over the next 5 years or so, Ray was kind enough to bring me, because he was also the official agent for the Irish soccer team, and he carried not just the soccer team but the media that used to follow the teams, and also a lot of supporters. So I was very privileged over the next 4 or 5 years to do a lot of travel with Ray and the great team that he had around him. And I got to see some amazing countries that I never would have got to see. And one of the highlights was, ironically, people might remember, any soccer fans would remember, a playoff that Ireland was involved in with Iran in 2001. And I was lucky enough to travel to Iran with Ray and the team, an experience that I will bring to the grave. Just one of the most amazing trips, if not the most amazing trip of my life.
Fantastic. Isn't it amazing where, you suddenly start from school where you hadn't a clue and suddenly you find yourself in Iran. I
Indeed,
just
yeah.
love life, where it takes you. So from Ray Tracy, I know you hold him in great esteem. What do you think were his qualities that would have rubbed off on you?
Oh, Ray's qualities. I think attention to detail was his attention to detail, and definitely just they left no stone unturned. They really, really cared about their people. And, it was customer first. He loved his team, loved him, he loved his team, but he really served his clients. And also that building a team around him, he invested in getting not just the right number of people, but the right people around him to support him, so that we were able to really look after the people that he, that were his clients, as it were. So they're the two big things: attention to detail and getting the right people around you, and just putting people first. Yes, I'm quite sure they were there to make money, because every business makes a profit.
Yes, of course,
But a
yeah.
line I talk about a lot is care more about the customer than you do about the sale. And that's one thing I learned from my dad, to care more about the customer than you do about the sale. And if you do that, I believe it tends to attract more and more customers, because people really feel that you are there to help them, not to sell to them.
Yeah, and I think that's very, very important. And I think that's a great lesson for our listeners out there in terms of business, ethics and how to, run a business properly. People, I think, are often focused on the short term, quick sale without thinking of the long term relationship.
Indeed, yeah, yeah. It's a more long-term view. It's more a building relationships view. I talk a lot about building relationships, not just as a leader, but also with your customers. So when I'm fortunate to get a corporate client to hire me to speak on goal setting or leadership or public speaking, whatever it might be, I viewed that sale, if you want to call it that, as the start, not the end. Whereas, my old mindset would have been, very young, would have been, well, they've bought it off me now, next customer. But then you always have to get new and new, more and more customers. Whereas if we have that connection approach where we build relationships, it can just, even during the current times and we're obviously immersed in the times that we're in. I was only saying this to somebody this morning. I'm very fortunate to thankfully still have work to do, albeit it's down quite significantly, but still very fortunate to have great clients that are hiring me for work, albeit in a virtual world. But it's because of relationships I've built in the last 4 or 5 years. They're the people that are now thankfully continuing to put more work my way.
I just kind of want to switch tacks slightly here, Gerry, because I know you're a great man in terms of discipline and also, in being involved in adventure and the 32 marathons in 32 days. I know we're not going to talk too long about that, but obviously that built within you a certain amount of goal setting and the things we talk about now.
Yes, so I think, the 32 marathon in 32 days was an idea I came up with about 12 or 13 years ago. And it was to run a marathon in every county on the island of Ireland. And I ended up doing that 2 years later with a friend of mine. And so we did that in December of 2010, so 10 years ago. But we were 2 years getting ready for it, I guess, and that's,
Yeah.
we go back to that respect. I wanted to bring respect to the goal. So I came up with the idea, but I spent 2 years training for it. And I appreciate some people may say, why on earth would you want to do that? But we're all into different things. And I've identified the most important areas of my life. And I realize if I'm willing to achieve my true potential in these things, we get happiness from growth. And at that time, extreme sport and finding my true limit in that was an incredible adventure, as you put it. And so those years that I was doing that and a number of other events over a number of years, I got incredible happiness in that. But also my psychology changed because I just was stretching the bar all the time. And, I learned so many valuable lessons in that a goal, if we're willing to just stretch our thinking, it's amazing. Not just stretch our thinking, but stretch ourselves, because the principle of how you get to 32 miles in 32 days is just stretching. So even in the training, it's going from 10 miles to 11 miles and 11 miles to 12 miles. And obviously a little bit deeper than that in terms of the training plan. But it's just about, you can apply that to any goal, whether it's a sporting goal or a business goal. It also taught me that I'm capable of an awful lot more, because I would have thought 15 years ago running a marathon every day for 32 days was absolutely probably a bit bonkers, but also probably way beyond anything that we're capable of. But my psychology has changed completely. And I think the reason it's done that, Alec, is, if something doesn't challenge us, it doesn't change us. And I remember, rather ironically, for somebody that does what you do and what I do now as a professional speaker, in 2005, I was not the person I am today. I was pathologically fearful of public speaking. But I confronted that fear. I was so afraid of it, I had to go to a hypnotist to speak to an audience of 4 people. But my psychology changed because it challenged me so much. I got through it. I did it. My confidence went through the roof. And I began to realize, oh my gosh, what else have you been telling yourself you can't achieve? Because this showed me that I could achieve anything if I put my mind to it. So that's when I started to get really focused on coming up with the biggest, most important things in my life and setting maybe a higher bar in terms of the goals that I was now not just capable of reaching, but now decided that I am going to pursue these things, not just talk about it, but actually do it.
I think you've identified something quite interesting there is, as you said, you had this pathological fear of speaking, but you went for outside help. You didn't try to deal with it yourself, or you recognized there was a time I actually need outside help.
Yeah, and I talk a lot about that. I don't think there's definitely a week, if not a day, doesn't go by that I don't ask for help for other people. And that's Carol Dweck in her book Mindset talks about a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. That's a growth mindset, even to be open to, the wisdom of others, even appreciating that other people, there's a saying I heard somewhere, if you're the smartest person in the room, you need to find a new room. But it's because otherwise you'll stay at the level you're at if you want to get to a higher level. So definitely around, and so many books we read, business books, they all talk about a lot of the same things. They have a lot of the same tips. They just share it through their own viewpoint. But it's about like what Ray Tracy did, get the right people around you, and similarly just getting the right people around you to help you whatever it is you might feel you might need help in. But that in itself may take a growth mindset, because at one time in my life I definitely had a fixed mindset where I couldn't have countenance doing what I'm doing now, didn't have the ambition I have now, and wouldn't have been open maybe to getting help from other people like I am now. And I would encourage that to everybody to do that.
It must have been quite interesting. And again, I'm using the business correlation, but just talking about the 32 marathons, there must have been setbacks on that, and how you mentally get over those setbacks along the way, where you suddenly think, wow, this is not going to happen.
Yeah, my number one experience there, my number one, maybe in terms of what's one thing that I could share here that might be of interest to people is, and I do it a lot now in goal setting programs that we do, is, we write the goal. I encourage people to get very specific on the goal. Don't waste 20 years saying you want to be a great golfer like I did, because that's what I spent 20 years. That was my goal. I want to be a great golfer. But anybody that knows anything about goal setting would say, Gerry, what were you thinking? Like, that's not a smart goal. It's not specific. It's not measurable. Is it achievable? Like, how would you know? Is it relevant? And is it time bound? It was none of those things. So then I got really specific, and I learned the value of getting very specific on goals. So that's one thing I encourage people. But also, how do you sustain if you do hit a wall, as you mentioned? What will carry you through that? So what I encourage people to do is to set specific goals, put timelines in place, maybe put deadlines, or maybe even non-negotiable deadlines in place. But also capture at the outset, why do you want this goal so much? Why do you want this goal so much? Because the why, chances are the why is something emotive. It's going to create emotion in you. It's something, it's a deep, deep reason, motivation for doing it. And if the why is strong enough, it will carry you through days when you might hit a wall, be low in confidence, just for whatever reason, not feel that you have the drive or the ability or the resources to get through. But I wouldn't leave this to chance, because we won't be in the mood for this when we hit the wall. So I encourage people to write down the goals, write down why they want the goal. I remember going back to, when I was 27, I put on a lot of weight. I put on 3.5 stone from when I left school, decided to lose the weight. And I used to go out walking every night. And the motivation was there at the beginning. But then in November of that year, I used to go for a walk each night. And then in November of that year, I opened up the door one night and it was lashing rain. Now I've hit maybe a wall. My motivation, my drive is being tested. But the reason I went out that night was because I didn't realize it at the time, but I reminded myself of why it was in my interest to go out. And one of them was around, my waist size. I put up 3 waist sizes. That's one reason I went out. And also I read that the average life expectancy of an Irish male, I think at the time, was 72. So you've got to go out tonight, because the way you were living your life, you won't see 52. These were my whys, Alec. So I encourage people not just to capture their whys, but if you do hit a wall, maybe you set a goal in January to drive your business by 20%. Why do you really want that? We're going to invest in this new product, do all this new research. Why do you want to do that? And when you hit a wall, in case you're going to give up or before you give up, reconnect with the why, really get into the emotion of the why. And the chances are the why will reignite emotion in you, and emotion creates motion, and motion is where you get back doing the things you need to do to achieve the goal in the first place. That's the value of the why. That's one of the biggest learnings I've got. Even Simon Sinek, I think, has spoken about the value of the why, and lots of other people are speaking about it now. It's truly powerful, I believe.
Yes, I mean, I know people give up too easily. Sometimes my own motivation becomes under question. But you're actually, if I'm not mistaken, you're writing a book at the moment around motivation, are you not, Gerry?
Funny, ironically, on leadership, actually.
Oh,
yeah.
leadership.
Leadership, yeah. So just finished it. It's
You're busy again and writing another book. What's that, your fourth one or something, is it?
It is, yeah, fourth book, yeah. Coming out hopefully in the autumn.
Right. Do you want to say anything about it?
Oh, okay, thank you. I didn't realize you were going to ask me that. So it's a book on leadership. It's about 25 things to think about for senior leaders and CEOs. So the book official title is Thoughts on Leadership, 25 things to think about for senior leaders and CEOs. It's just random ideas, experiences, learnings that I've encountered or learned from other people over the years. So it's really just a mix of lots of different things in different areas. But, definitely relationships is in it, talking about the quality of relationships. And a couple of other things, even some very abstract things, very different things to one chapter, very different to the next. I speak about, mastermind groups and the value and impact of mastermind, getting the right people just to support you, to challenge you, to hold you accountable. I speak about what's your behavior like every week, because your behavior outside of work is definitely impacting how you show up inside of work. If you want to be a great leader, a question I ask in a deep level in one of the chapters is to show up at your optimum best as a leader. What does an ideal week look like for you? What time are you going to bed? At what time are you getting up at? What are the things that help you show up at your best? And I kind of put that under a microscope, show people how to really get aligned with that, to measure it, and then to set a goal. Because in the book, you'll come up with your things. I share what mine are, but all the behavior really matters. The very first day I went back to exercise at the age of 27, I felt better. I went for a 5K. I was a lot heavier, went for a 5K, felt an awful lot better having done it. That taught me that, behavior matters. I felt better. That taught me that life rewarded effort. So, if we want to show up at our best as a leader, what are the behaviors that are going to help us do that? So lots of abstract and very simple ideas, but I'd like to think people will find them interesting. So we'll soon find out.
Fantastic. I mean, in terms of these things, there's no doubt in my mind, the fact that you were able to compete, and all of these endurance challenges suggests that you certainly are consistent in delivery. A lot of people fall off the wagon. Have you any advice for those people?
Probably the best, piece of advice is start in the shallow end. And, a simple example, I love to use the analogy of a pool. And if we're trying to change behavior, we might say, very often we go for radical goals. I need to radically change this. So simple example, I need to radically change my work-life balance. And simple example might be, I want to be at home every evening at 6 o'clock to spend time with my two kids. For example, that's somebody's goal. And I might ask them, well, where are you at the moment? What's your standard at the moment? Well, I'm never at home. So what we're looking for is, I believe, that's deep end radical goals. But you've shown no evidence you can swim in the shallow end, because I say, how often are you doing? And you say, I'm never home at 6 o'clock. So now next week you want perfection. If you only do it 4 times, how will you feel? Well, I haven't achieved my goal because I said it was 5. So what I encourage people to do is, I'm just using that as an example, go way back up to the other end of the pool. Start in the very, very, very shallow end and show evidence that you can swim at that depth where you're not getting out of your depth before you dive into a depth that you haven't yet got the ability to swim in. So for that person, it might be next week, definitely once, because I'm never doing it now. I'm definitely going to do it once next week. And even give yourself the freedom of it. I have 5 days to do it. And what we do is we go and do that. Chances are, if we can't do that, we definitely can't do the other when you think about it. Yes, so go and do that for 3 or 4 weeks. Build that ability where it becomes consistent and something that you now have the skills to do almost without thinking after 3 or 4 weeks, because you've also, by putting your toe in the water and trying it out, you get that win, you get that bit of confidence. Also, you've got your feet wet, so you know what it feels. It feels different, which will motivate you now to go to the next level of the pool. That's where you say, now I'm going to do it twice. Now, if you overachieve, that's fine, but success is once. Build that muscle over 3 or 4 weeks, then go further down the pool. I find that's a much more realistic for almost all of us, and much more likely to lead to sustained behavior, which ultimately is what most people are looking for at the end of the day, rather than diving in the deep end and being overwhelmed and only achieving 60 or 70% and feeling we're not a success, which is not good thinking when you think about it. Back up to the shallow end and inch your way down the pool.
Yeah, and we end up beating ourselves up then over things, not achieving things which we were never likely to achieve in the first place because we didn't. So I think that's a great piece of advice. Tell me, I mean, we're into the last sort of few minutes of the show. Talk about the Gerry Duffy Academy. You have a number of projects going there, Gerry. What life floating your boat at the moment, as they say?
Sure. So most of what I do is public speaking, keynote speaking at conferences, albeit virtual conferences for the last 4 or 5 months. But usually in maybe open conference, closing conferences. Sometimes it's with small, like mine is a very small business, and sometimes it's with small and medium-sized businesses. Very often it's with really, really big companies. So I've been very privileged to work with some amazing companies, right from 1 or 2 people businesses up to hundreds of thousands, I guess, in terms of workforces. And helping them get from A to B, helping them in terms of leveraging the power of the people that work in the companies, how we can reach our potential. So I do maybe the keynotes, and then that leads to kind of deeper dive programs, strategy programs, helping companies achieve their vision and their goals for the year, maybe going in on a quarterly basis, that kind of thing. And something I'm working on at the minute is something very different, which is around helping people who need to do presentations. So I set up a thing called Speaker School a number of years ago to help people. Very often business people are giving presentations, and it's monumentally important when you think about it. So we help people with that. Ironically, somebody that was terrified of it, and very often people that come to me are nervous of it, so I can definitely help them there. And I'm in the process, which we're launching in the autumn, late autumn, is for aspiring and ambitious speakers who want to master the craft of speaking, stand out on stage, and make more money from doing what they love. So people that maybe see themselves as potentially people who get paid to speak. And so I'm creating a community for those people, that I'll be able to share the things that I've learned over the last 10 years of doing this full time, and also getting in other experts that I've managed to connect with, not just in Ireland, but across the world, that can help people, teach people very simple, but very effective and very powerful skills to be able to stand out rather than blend in. And some very simple things, because my entire business is dependent on me standing out as a speaker. So, and I've learned all this from zero, and I believe anybody can learn these things, because I was the person who was terrified of public speaking, and I firmly believe that if I can do it, anybody, if they really want to do it, can do it. So that's what that membership group is going to be all about.
And is there a specific name for that?
It is, but it's literally only been decided in the last 2 days, so we're still tweaking it a little bit.
Okay,
So in case it changes, I better hold it just in case.
Tell me, where can most people find details of Gerry Duffy? Give us the websites and maybe LinkedIn or something like that.
Sure. So yeah, LinkedIn is usually the easiest. So Gerry Duffy on LinkedIn, you'll see me there as an international speaker, and also GerryDuffyAcademy.com. They'll find lots of information there as well.
I suppose in the last sort of 90 seconds we've got, tell me just about, with the lockdown, how you're managing that, how that's transformed your business, and how you've managed to cope with that.
Yeah, so initially, and I'm sure like everybody, kind of the first week in March was almost normal. And I'm sure like everybody, March is a busy month for many, many people. I had a really busy March planned. And then that second week in March, it was like somebody opened the trap door and everything fell through. And I'm sure I'm sure everybody will empathize. Most people will empathize with that. So for me, the next 3 or 4 weeks was really just reaching out to customers. Like I found myself gone from being incredibly busy to incredibly quiet. And so the first thing I did was I said, well, it's time to really serve your customers now. So I reached out to some key clients and said, is there anything I can do for you? I said, just in terms of supporting you. So that kept me busy for 3 or 4 weeks. And that over time led to further conversations around things that we were doing with companies, because the longer it went on, the more we realized this isn't going anywhere. So thankfully clients start to get in touch. So now, as an example, just this morning with a colleague, we were doing half-day strategy with a client that we did 2 days in the room with back in January. but we were due to do a full live day at this time of the year. So instead, we've done 4 hours this morning in a virtual world with a team of 10 people, and we're doing the second half of what would have been a full day next Wednesday. So thankfully, doing lots of that, and also taking some of my core programs and kind of packaging them into 1 hour training modules. And thankfully, around leadership, around time management, around goal setting, around motivation and mindset, those kind of things. So thankfully, clients are now kind of packaging those to kind of give out to their employees and their customers.
That's fantastic. Well, what a very positive way to finish the show. A special thanks to our guest, Gerry Duffy of the Gerry Duffy Academy, for coming into the You and Your Business studio. Thanks also to Sam on Sound. And don't forget that you can contact the show by emailing yourbusiness@dublincityfm.ie with your thoughts and suggestions. The podcast today's show will be available from tomorrow. And don't forget to join me, Alec Drew, again, right here next week on You and Your Business, 12:30. And look forward to the podcast the following day. Many thanks. That's it. I'll stop that now. Now we can talk. Yep.